Hi, I'm Mike Papantonio, and this is America's Lawyer. The Supreme Court of Michigan has thrown out criminal charges against government officials involved in the Flint water crisis, and we'll talk to you about why that happened. The U.S. Supreme Court, well, they sided with a group of doctors that overprescribed painkillers. We'll tell you why they took a position like that. And 1 million voters have now abandoned the Democratic Party in favor of the GOP. It's a good story. You need to be aware of it. All that and more, it's coming up. Don't go anywhere. This is America's Lawyer, and we start right now. Criminal charges against the officials responsible for the Flint water crisis were thrown out by the Michigan Supreme Court last week, and I have Ring of Fire's Farron Cousins with me to talk about that and many more stories. Wow, what a disappointment, huh?
Disappointing, but unfortunately not surprising.
Yeah.
This is an issue. I've talked a lot with Jordan Cheriton, who's one of the investigative reporters, pretty much has been on the ground in Flint more than anybody else. He's done a fantastic job. We had a conversation earlier this year where he mentioned that Dana Nessel, this new Democratic Attorney General, was basically attempting at the time to kind of throw out all of this, almost like it was something she didn't want to deal with whatsoever. And so because of that, I think intentionally, I'm going to assume it was intentionally. I can't, say for sure, but it seems intentional that they botched these indictments to the point where the court really had no choice but to throw out.
Come on. First of all, Nessel, everybody thought she was going to be the local hero. Well, she turned out to be just another villain. As a matter of fact, when she came into office, there were 15 state politicians that were involved in this, and she made all those cases go away. 15. Then she appoints one person to say this is the grand jury. Now, granted, some places, it's at least information that you can take to a real grand jury. You talk to one, that information goes to multiple grand jury. But here, they brought the case, and one person was the grand jury, and she knew what the flaws of that were. She knew what the Supreme Court of this state was going to do. Any doubt?
No, absolutely no doubt in my mind that this was all intentional because, one, we're talking about political prosecutions here because we're dealing with politicians. But these are politicians that made decisions that killed people. They killed them from Legionnaires. They've, essentially crippled an entire generation with lead poisoning. We're going to see those effects for, 30, 40 years and beyond at this point. And she didn't want to deal with that. These were real, very simple charges to make. Yeah. You have the emails, you have the text messages, the phone calls. All of this was on record. These officials, a lot of Republicans, some Democrats, but all of them making these decisions knowing people would die. And she botched it.
The term is willful neglect of duty. Okay, there's a statute there. Most states have a statute like this. It's where the conduct is so bad that the conduct in this situation, it wasn't that they didn't know. It's once they got the information, they tried to phony it up. They tried to cover it up. They tried to save themselves. They even destroyed data. They destroyed information that shows how bad a job they did on this issue. This is infuriating. This is one of the state employees. State employees should not be prosecuted or demonized for just doing their job. Did you see that? Really, just doing their job. They killed 9 people from Legionnaire's disease. As you point out, they have affected an entire generation with lead poisoning.
Look, you go up to bat against some of the biggest, polluters, the biggest pharmaceutical companies in the world. If you had the kind of documents that she had on these people, that'd be a slam dunk case for you. You could walk in and they wouldn't even know what hit them because it was so glaringly obvious. And yet in this case, it takes a certain amount of just, I'd say, willful neglect of your duty as Attorney General to botch this case.
Yeah, again, it comes back. She knew if you have a one-person grand jury, that's going to go real bad real fast. But it was political paybacks for her. She was going after Snyder, who was a Republican, not a great Republican, by the way, not even a great politician, by the way, not a very kind person, by the way, but she was going after him. She was Democrat. And then rather than just playing fair, just say, let's let the system take care of itself. Let's do this straight up. She appointed a one-person grand jury, acting like she didn't know where that was going to go. One of the largest accounting firms in America has hit with a massive fine that was revealed that they had their accountants cheat on their ethics exam. I swear to you, I read this article, this is a CNN article, and I had to read it a couple of times. I thought what they were talking about was that they were cheating in the way that they evaluated the ethics of other corporations, which is what they're supposed to do, but no. They cheated on their own ethics exam. Pick it up from there.
Right. You've got Ernst & Young, which again, one of the biggest accounting firms here in the United States. Turns out that they have had countless people that work for them to get their, CPA license to be able to do the auditing of these other companies that were cheating to get the license. So you're basically hiring these people who clearly were not smart enough to pass their exams on their own, clearly not qualified to do this. But Ernst & Young knew these people were cheating, possibly even encouraged it.
Well, no, they did encourage it.
Yeah.
They encouraged it. Matter of fact, KPMG, which is another huge accounting firm, in 2019 were caught for the same thing. And what they were doing was actually telling them how to go about cheating. Ernst & Young was doing the same thing. Ernst & Young comes out and says, well, there's nothing more, this is their words, that's disgusting. This is a spokesman for Ernst & Young. There's nothing more important than our integrity and our ethics, and we'll stand behind our conduct all the time. This is what they say, and they know that the people that are out supposed to be auditing other corporations and saying, is what this corporation, is what they've done, first of all, is it legal? Second of all, is it ethical? These are the people making that decision, the people who cheated on their ethics exam.
Well, isn't this, this is just Wall Street, though. This is what Wall Street is. They're so bad at ethics that they have to cheat at it. Yeah. And $100 million fine, okay, it's one of the biggest fines we've seen. It's still pathetic. It's pathetic because they knew what they were doing. They got away with it for as long as they could. Now they just have to pay the cost of doing business.
Well, I mean, look, lawyers would have their license taken away. Yeah. I mean, it's not even a question. You would have your license taken away. Why wouldn't they do that here? What's different at Wall Street is than the way the ABA treats their attorneys. Take their license away is the answer here. The Supreme Court has sided with doctors who overprescribed opioid painkillers to their patients. They were running pill mills. That's what it was. And as you know, we handled we're still in the process of handling this national opioid case that's going on. And there's no question that the pill mill doctors knew exactly what they were doing. They knew they were killing 150 people a day. They knew exactly what the ramifications were of selling fentanyl in numbers that were just staggering. But the Supreme Court, Justice Breyer of all people, Justice Breyer says, well, they didn't get a good jury instruction because there wasn't enough emphasis on intent beyond a reasonable doubt. Pick it up from there.
Yeah, this is absolutely disgusting. I mean, you had this unanimous ruling.
Yeah.
Breyer, who now is gone from the court, thank goodness, but says, you're a little unclear. You couldn't really prove the intent of these doctors. And all of the evidence says, no, the intent is clear. These doctors understood that you were giving people enough fentanyl to kill them and kill several other people. Mm-hmm. There was no excuse, there was no reason or rationale for the amount of prescriptions these two doctors involved in this case were prescribing to their people. This was clearly a way to get pills out there on the open
they had deals. Okay, they had deals with the distributors. The distributors, whether it was McKesson or AmerisourceBergen or Cardinal, they would pump pills into the pill mills. They would go to cities like, where there's 1,000 people and sell 6 million pills through these doctors. These doctors were simply from a RICO standpoint, they were simply part of that criminal conduct. And so I looked at his decision on this. I go, wow.
Well, and see, that's the part of the story that I think a lot of people miss. We know about the manufacturers. We know about the distributors of the medication, but people always forget none of this is possible without that prescription from the doctor. That is where it originates, and that is where this plan basically takes off from people like these.
The distributors they would search the country, and they would have lists of who ran the pill mills. and they would put more emphasis in those doctors. They would do everything they could to implement as much material, as much narcotic going to that doctor as they could. It was part of their plan. And these guys, they were part of it, and the Supreme Court says, they didn't get a good, there was no good jury instruction on that, really. More than 1 million Democrats have switched parties in the past year, it's really creating a serious problem for the Democratic Party. Farron, what is your take? This to me, if I'm a Democrat looking at it, I'm seeing the suburban swing votes that are leaving the Democratic Party. That's what's happening.
Yeah, this is terrifying for the Democratic Party. It's also 100% predictable. We have seen a Democratic Party that's been in power now for 18 months. We just concluded the 18th month. So what have they done? What have they done to show you that they understand your problems, that they're addressing the issues? And the answer is, unfortunately for these voters, nothing at all. Their lives have in fact gotten worse, economically, politically, with as divided as we are. And they looked at this and they said, look, I'm not going to be a part of your club anymore, because the public always does that, right? They bounce back and forth every 2 years or so. That's natural. But not in these numbers. It is. It truly is.
Well, you're seeing it in Denver, Atlanta, Pittsburgh, Cleveland, Iowa. I thought the study was interesting. It was done by the AP. And they really spent a lot of time trying to figure out what are these things, according to, I'm just going from the study, but they found that there's this rejection of this woke leftist thing that the Democrats came in and tried to sell. Okay, in other words, don't deal with trying to reshape culture in 18 months. Don't try to force something down my throat in 18 months that I don't want to listen to. Talk about politics. Engage in good political change. Do some good stuff for us. And that's all they had to do here. But it's kind of like the same, I don't know if you followed the deal with Netflix. Same thing's happening with Netflix. They're finding that all of this effort by Netflix to reshape culture, let's change the way people think about this cultural issue. That's where Netflix is getting killed right now. And there's an exodus of Netflix because people want to be entertained. And the same thing with politics. They just want politicians to talk about politics that improve their lives. They don't want to be preached to about cultural change.
Well, here's the interesting thing about that too, and you're not wrong about people, leaving the party about that, obviously. But the Democrats are not actually pushing that. What's being pushed is the Republicans pretending that the Democrats are pushing this, and then trying to, and not trying, they are passing all of this culture war legislation, addressing problems that aren't actually real, but the legislation now creates a lot of problems.
So in other words, it's not...
It's a messaging issue the Democrats failed.
Your point being, it's not the Democrats that woke up one day and said, hey, let's force feed the American public these cultural changes, the way that we think about our culture. Let's force feed them that. You're saying that wasn't really part of the intent, but the Republicans have done a good job taking that and making the American people believe this is what the Democrats are doing. Did I get that right?
Yeah, and they obviously put the Democrats on their heels on these issues. So then the Democrats, when they talk about them, the Republicans can then highlight it and say, see, look, now they're shoving it down your throat again. It's honestly, from a political standpoint, not saying I agree with any of it, it's a smart strategy by the Republican Party because they have smarter strategists than the Democratic Party does. Yeah. And then as the Democrats try to undo this culture war legislation, Republicans then get to come back and say, but they're not focused on the economy. They're not addressing inflation.
I think that's a good point, Farron. The only thing, the caveat to that is that you're seeing it in other areas too. You're seeing it with the media. For example, CNN and MSNBC. It's almost as if the public woke up one day and they said, shut the hell up. I don't want to agree every time you're trying to shove some cultural change down my throat. I don't want to agree with that. And their numbers went down. Same with Netflix. Same with Disney. I mean, just take a look at that. But I really do buy into your idea that maybe it didn't originate from a political standpoint with the Democrats, that the Republicans have just been damn smart in making it look like that.
Right, and like I said, once they get the Democrats to have to address these issues, then the Republicans go out there like they are right now. You look on social media, the Republicans are saying, listen, Democrats are all focused on the Roe decision, and they're not talking about inflation that's hurting you and your family at home. They create the issues, force the Democrats to have to address it, and then hit them for not doing
Real
the
quick before we
stuff.
go on to the next segment, Farron, I'm interested. You've talked about, and I agree with you, I've taken a look at everything I can read about it, is that there's this belief that, I think there's a groundswell belief that Roe v. Wade decision is going to really be a big, big change for the midterms. You and I have talked about it before. You're of the opinion, where do you fall on that? Do you really think it makes that big of a difference?
If the election were today, a week and a half away from the decision, sure. Anytime beyond that, no. The public does move on. I mean, eventually, we're going to hit a point where the public, I'm talking within 6 months, the public's going to be like, well, it's always been that way. They will forget about this. The anger will subside because you can't sustain anger for that long. So they will move on to the other issues. They'll keep getting hit economically every time they go buy groceries, every time they fill up their tank with gas. I'd love for it to be a political issue in November, but I don't think it's not going to be.
Yeah, I think you may be right. I don't think it's a groundswell change.
No.
It could be, but the way, it's almost as if the media is even playing a role. Every time I watch some story about it, it's almost as if they have the really oddball fringe out, throwing F-bombs and attacking this person, and you go, that's not really the way most people think. They just want the logic on how bad this decision was. They don't want to go, let's go kill this person, or let's take this really big step towards doing away with the Supreme Court. But that's the kind of edge you're seeing out there right now, and I think it's hurting them.
Well, and not to mention, you have a lot of people right now that, yes, even though the conservative court did this, they're furious with the Democrats for literally sitting on this issue for 50 years and not doing anything about it. So this could hurt the Democrats because it showed the voters the threat from the Republicans was real. The Democrats ignored it. They're not fighting for you.
Didn't rise to the occasion to actually do anything about it.
Yeah.
A majority of Americans say that it's time for term limits for the Supreme Court. This ties right into what I'm talking about. As you watch this discussion, look, there are so many great reasons to talk about this being a bad decision. But it doesn't start off with, let's do away with the Supreme Court. Let's start a supermajority requirement for the Supreme Court. You see the problem there, right? It's just who's in power at the time. Right now it's the Democrats, and this would be good for the Democrats in their mind. A, it's never going to happen. B, all it does is creates this possibility that if it does happen, the next party that's going to be in charge is going to be the Republicans. I don't get that logic.
Listen, I've always been a big fan of term limits, not just for the Supreme Court and every federal court, but for Congress as well. And I think a lot of these members of Congress who have literally no idea who they're talking to on any given day, according to reports, they're a great argument for term limits. And this is where the country needs to go. And I'm glad we're finally starting to see people wake up. Because, you've got, Clarence Thomas was appointed by George H.W. Bush. He has been on that court for 31 years, an entire generation on that court. And time's up, buddy. And you got a lot of other ones, too, that have just been there for far too long. They hang on for too long. And most importantly, they lose touch with what actually happens in the real world. And to me, that's the biggest problem, not just with justices, but with the politicians too.
Articles that are coming out, and they make a lot of sense to me. If you're a Supreme Court judge, let's say you're Kavanaugh, you have been attacked while you were going through the process, justifiably so on a lot of issues. You've had now this outcry about, it's okay to, he had his family at risk. You understand? The man's family was at risk by some left-winger who believed it was a good idea to go carry a gun and threaten the family. With Thomas right now, whether you agree with him or not, I'm not even talking about do you agree. We don't agree with most of that. But if you're Clarence Thomas, you have your wife under attack, you're under attack, you're being called everything in the world. And at some point, what effect does that have on a Supreme Court judge when you have limitless power to do what you want to do? Do you think that's a good idea?
No, you're absolutely right about that. And look, We got an interview from the New York Times from 1993 where Thomas's clerk said his goal, because what he went through during his confirmation, his goal was
to get back,
for
get
the next,
even.
next 43 years, make liberals' lives miserable. That's
right.
what he said.
Well, that's my point.
Yeah.
That's my point. And so your Supreme Court judge, whoever you are, whether you're Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, it doesn't make any difference. You're under this attack from the left. How can you not get to the point to where you hate them so badly that every chance you can take, everything you can do to shut them down, you're going to do? I don't know a living, breathing human being that this doesn't have an effect on. And I don't know why people don't see that.
Well, and not to mention, you also know that you can do this with really no oversight whatsoever.
Yeah.
We've never actually impeached a Supreme Court justice here in the United States, at least not impeached and removed. So they know that, look, I can do whatever. I can not recuse myself.
Right.
I can sit here and just basically tell you, yeah, I'm only doing this because I hate you, and nobody's going to stop you. And that, to me, is one of the best arguments for term
Well, it's the
limits.
argument, you don't go after the king unless you can get rid of the king. You see what I'm saying? You don't start a war with the king unless you can get rid of the king. And that's what's happened with the Supreme Court. Every time this kind of thing happens, I don't care how strong they are from a personal character, this affects their ability to be objective. School shootings in America have now hit their highest number in over 20 years. Wow, no surprise here, but this was a startling kind of number. This was done by the National Center of Education and Statistics. What did they find, Farron?
93 incidents in the 2020-21 school year. 43 resulted in fatalities, 50 involved injuries, but 93 shootings at schools here in the United States, public and private, which means on a typical 180-day school year, every other school day in this country, somebody's getting shot in one of our schools.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the problem with it is the statistics speak for themselves. I mean, you can't hide these statistics. These numbers have gone, they're startling numbers. This is the highest total in the history of keeping up with these kind of statistics. And you can only hope that, look, maybe some good comes out of the effort to do something. I mean, the red flag law, I love it. I love the idea of enhanced background check for people that are under 21. The idea of if you've been convicted of abuse of any kind, of spousal abuse, you can't get a gun without having to jump through some hoops. This is all good stuff. The idea of having youth mental health facilities that are improved and expanded.
And I think the more I think about it, especially after seeing these numbers, that may be the big one. Because, yeah, we understand we got more guns than anybody else. You and I have talked about that. But we got to get to the root of why this is even happening. We have to get really into that psyche, talk to these people, try to figure out, avert problems before they happen. Because it is, as you and I have, again, talked about in recent weeks, it's not just that we have the guns. What is making these people want to use them against children? That's what we have to get to the heart of.
I think we've talked about this on other shows where the expansion of social media has also enhanced and almost put on steroids the enhancement of bullying.
Yeah.
If you look at every one of these shooters, you go back, you take a look, they've been, it's the same pattern. They've been called losers, and they're the folks that sit up in their room all day long at home, 8 hours a day on, whatever they do. They're isolated. They're not really involved in what's going on around the school or whatever. And so it's that bullying aspect of social media is now coming to the forefront. As a matter of fact, some good friends of mine are bringing some cases that I think are going to prevail here, and that how does social media enhance the ability and actually promote this notion of bullying? I think there's something to this, and the best article I've seen about this overall picture talks about that with each one of these people, each one of these kids that have been involved in this. There's been some history of that.
Well, and another part of that too, the other side of it really is that not only are these people experiencing more bullying because of the online presence, they also have their own communities of people who kind of have the same issues. where they talk about violence, where they all, kind of feed off one another.
You're talking about a blog
Yeah,
or
message boards and things like
boards.
that. And so you get these people who hype up these feelings of hate that you have. So that's another big part of it. That's the second half.
But that's a social media vehicle.
Right.
Yeah.
And so again, with the mental health screenings and things like that, we have to start teaching parents, like, look for these signs, because it's not just the kids, the parents. Be an active parent.
Be a damn leader, a parent.
Really.
Walk into the room and say, "What the hell are you doing, kid?
Yeah.
You know what? Let me read what you've done on this computer." I mean, it doesn't take a lot to do that.
Sometimes it really is as simple as saying, hey, come on, let's play Monopoly.
Yeah.
Let's play a board game. Let's play Scrabble. And I'm not kidding. I mean, look, I have a 19-year-old who has moved out of the house, and he calls us every now and then. He says, "Hey,
let's play Scrabble.
Can I come over? We'll do like a
That's
game
great.
night."
Yeah.
Because those little things like that
Yeah.
do have such an impact, and that falls on the parents. That's not on the kid. That's on the
Hey,
parents.
what's wrong with walking through the door and saying, Mary, Joe, I want to see what you're doing. Let me take a look at your history on I want to see what you're up to. What's wrong with that? Maxwell, well, she's been sentenced to 20 years in prison for her role in the Jeffrey Epstein sex trafficking and prostitution operation. I got to tell you something. There is nothing which you should look at this woman sympathetically about. And I think the people that appeared in court, she was described as a manipulative, cruel, merciless monster. Okay? Of course, that's not what she's projecting now. Her lawyers are projecting, oh, the poor thing. Her daddy was killed when she was a child. She was abused as a child. There's so many things we need to forgive her for. No, not really. She was involved in extensive child exploitation. She got 20 years. I wish she could have gotten more.
I think this is an individual who should never have had the option of walking outside of a prison ever again.
Yeah.
20 years is not enough for what she did. The trauma these women carry with them now forever, for eternity, for also not giving us the names of every single person that used these women. Because to me, that's the part of the story that has to get told. I don't even care how we get it out of her, but we have to get those names. She does, and it's beyond time, because what Epstein did was unforgivable. What she did was unforgivable, but they were doing it for all these people.
Yeah, Farron, I loved what this judge did. This is Judge Allison Nathan. Did the sentencing. She did the calculation. She says, well, if I calculate, she was up front, I'm going to calculate the worst I can do, and then I'm going to add some to it. So she calculated between 15 and 19 years, and she says, you know what, that's not enough. I'm sending you away for 20 years. And I think it was exactly what had to happen. I'm actually seeing the media soften up on this woman. Like the poor, pitiful woman, she was a manipulative, cruel, merciless monster. That's the way she was described by the people who came to court and said, look, you took my child, okay, who came from a broken home, who you enticed him with $100 here, $100 there to give Mr. Epstein a massage, and then involved the children in some type of sex act. You did that. And you preyed on these children some of them were runaways, some of them were just coming from absolute poverty, but a lot of them came from broken homes. They were she would target these victims. She's the worst of the worst where it comes to predators.
Right. One of them told the story about how she was just a young girl at Mar-a-Lago, of all places, and Maxwell is the one who approached her, manipulated her, recruited her, and she told that story in court. And she said, this woman has no redeeming qualities. Mm-hmm. She is just as evil as Jeffrey himself was. Yeah. Maybe even more so, because she knew what she was doing. She used her, she said, femininity to entice them. Yeah.
She would put up this veneer. Look, this isn't so bad. Go in there and have sex with a guy. He's going to give you $100, and you go home, and finally you can pay for stuff that you can't buy because you're living in poverty. This is awful, awful story. Is she going to pull through, or is it going to be another Epstein story?
I hope she does, because we have to have those names. I hope that she has some kind of contingency where maybe she's written them down somewhere
And is
where
looking
we'll
to
find it.
maybe have the sentence reduced.
Right, but so far, nobody that had sex with these women has faced justice, and that is unacceptable. For what we know.
Prince Andrew's next. Yeah.
Well, let's hope so. And there's, a lot of high-profile politicians and tech people in the U.S.
The number of Wall Streeters is off the chart.
Wall
from what
Streeters, scientists.
Yeah.
We need names, and we need them now.
I agree. Farron, thank you for joining me.
Thank you.
That's all for this week, but all of these segments are going to be available on this coming week right here on this channel, and you can follow us on Twitter at America's Lawyer. I'm Mike Papantonio, and this has been America's Lawyer, where every week we tell you the stories that corporate media won't tell you because their advertisers won't let them or their political connections just don't allow for it. We'll see you next time.